On today's Locked On Jayhawks, the top 10 best wins of the Lance Leipold era at Kansas.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every show. Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year upcoming here. And we wanted to give you a little content, even maybe went away for the holidays, because maybe you're not away on one of these holiday days. So today we're going to be going over the top 10 best Kansas Jayhawks football wins of the Lance Leipold era. Tomorrow we will have the 10 best wins during the calendar year of 2024 for KU basketball. So thanks for joining us today. And this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, before we get into the top 10, is brought to you by Game Time. You might be going to a bowl game or, I don't know, a college football playoff game or something, or maybe you're in the area, you want to go to an NBA, hockey game, whatever it is. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. All right, so let's start right there. So we have the top 10 wins, top 10 best wins of the Lance Leipold era so far at Kansas. Now, the Lance Leipold era goes back to the start of the 2021 season. What goes into my top 10 rankings here? A little bit of the importance of the win, a little bit of, what that season ended up being, a little bit on the style of the win, right? I mean, if it was a more entertaining game, then that's going to boost it up there. And then a little bit of just randomness, whatever I was thinking when I put together this list. And everybody, you might be, oh, that's number 3 for me, 6 for you. That's the beauty of it. Okay, let's get into it. Number 10, best win of the Lance Leipold era was the 2022 matchup versus Iowa State. Kansas comes in at 4-0 on the season. Iowa State comes in at 3-1 on the season. And this was the 2022 season in which Kansas ends up going bowling. So in theory, every win was the difference between you making a bowl and not making a bowl game. And so this one becomes important there. It was a much more entertaining first half than it was the second half. The first half, Kansas puts up 14 points. You get a Daniel Highshaw rushing touchdown. You get a Jalon Daniels rushing touchdown. And it felt like KU was kind of in control. But then at the end of the first half, Iowa State ends up getting a touchdown pass. They get a 2-point conversion. All of a sudden, it's 14-8 at halftime. You go into the second half, and then field goal chaos ensues for Iowa State. Kansas couldn't really do anything on offense in the second half. Jalon Daniels finished 7 of 14 for 93 yards. Devin Neal averaged 6.3 yards per carry. Why was he not getting the ball more on 12 carries? But they just couldn't really move the ball. The difference in this game was A, the KU defense did a pretty good job. B, Matt Campbell probably, he went for several fourth downs, but he wasn't aggressive enough in the very end. And then that kind of difference on the field goal kicking. Jace Gilbert did make 1 field goal, but he missed 3. He was 1 for 4 on the day field goal, and Kansas wins 14-11. The reason it's up here, because that is not a exciting game. It was ugly, but it led to Kansas getting to 5-0. That was probably what got it over the edge for Kansas to get to host College Game Day for the very first time ever. And like I said, every win ended up being the difference in you making a bowl game. So it wasn't a thing of beauty, but I think it's one that a lot of Kansas fans will remember for a long time, both in terms of, yes, that helped you that was the week before you got College Game Day, right? That allowed you to be ranked for the first time in a long time. But beyond that, just the insanity of how you won the game. So that one's in at number 10. Number 9 on the list is we're going to go with the 45-36 victory over number 17 Iowa State in Arrowhead. This is going to be a run of Iowa State games at the start of this list. By the way, I should mention, I was going to put an honorable mention on here. I guess now I'm mentioning it anyway. I ended up having that 35-27 win over that 9-win Duke team in 2022 with Riley Leonard as honorable mention. And I don't know, maybe style of game, that one should have been over the Iowa State one. I think it just is more memorable when you're playing a team from your own conference. But anyway, that was the perfect JD game. Anyway, number 9, 45-36 against number 17 Iowa State this past season in Arrowhead. So the reason this one's not higher, because you get a lot of points, 45-36. You're beating a really good Iowa State team who at the time was ranked 17th in the country, giving them their second consecutive loss at the time. You get an excellent game from Jalon Daniels. over 12 yards per attempt. He had 295 yards passing with 2 touchdowns to go with 68 yards rushing and a touchdown. Devin Neal was great, 18 carries, 116 yards for the Jayhawks. Quentin Skinner, 4 catches for 135. And J.B. Brown ends up with 10 tackles for the defense in this game. It obviously was a big win for KU because it got them off the mat a little bit. You were going 2-6 into that tough stretch with 3 straight ranked opponents, which you obviously ended up winning all 3. This kick-started that, right? And it probably didn't have as much significance or like when you beat BYU and Colorado after this game, you start to really get your hopes up like, oh, maybe they can make a bowl game. At this point, even when you did win this one, it still felt like, okay, that's going to be a little bit of a far cry to make a bowl game, which obviously didn't end up happening because of the difficulty, partially of that schedule in which you didn't take advantage in the early portion. So this one's not going to be as high up as those ones, but it was still cool. You still beat a ranked opponent. You still gave yourself a positive memory. And that one is number 9. Number 8 on the list, we're going to go back to an Iowa State game. We're going to go back to 2023, which would be a 28-21 victory in Ames at Iowa State. So that Iowa State team after that loss was 5-4. Kansas was 7-2. And in theory, if you're saying who was the better opponent you beat, it's this year's Iowa State was the better opponent you beat. But the fact that Kansas came into this game ranked 22nd, the fact that this got Kansas to 7 wins, so surpassing the year before, and it's really hard to win on the road, right? We've seen that with Kansas. It was a road night game. I think they were having like a blackout or something in the stands. Tough place to play, and Kansas delivered with a 28-21 victory. And then you go to it and say, okay, even though this year's Iowa State win was, over a higher ranked opponent, you didn't end up making a bowl game out of it. Last year, I guess you could say if you don't win at Iowa State, you're still probably in a similar bowl, and is there a gigantic difference, 8 to 9 wins at the end of the season? I don't know, probably not. But, you look at it and I think that just, there's something about it when you do have a season in which you win a bowl game where every memory, every game feels like it matters more, I guess would be the way of putting it. Like everything becomes more memorable, and to go on the road, like those ones just feel a little bit more special. And this was a game where Jason Bean played really well for Kansas, 14 of 23, 287 and a touchdown. They shut down the Kansas running game. Devin Neal, 2.7 yards per carry. Daniel Highshaw, 3.2 yards per carry. But you hit big passes. LJ Arnold, 112 yards receiving. Quentin Skinner, 84 yards receiving. Jason Bean was good. And then you also got some big-time defensive plays. Mello Dotson had a 50-yard pick 6. I think this was kind of the emergence of like Gage Keys. You got, just a really impressive road effort in a game that Kansas easily could have won by more than 7 points, but Iowa State just kind of wouldn't go away. And I think that was a really good win that really it just, I think, showed what that Kansas team was all about in a very real way. That if you're Kansas at that point, right, you come into that game having to play at Iowa State after you beat Oklahoma. And you see it all the time across college football. What separates a good program from just like a Purdue, right? You think of Purdue, like it feels like they're always upsetting, not the last couple of years, they've been really bad, but like they're always like upsetting like ranked opponents. But then you look up at the end of the day, maybe they're like 6-6, right? They're not, you're not getting the consistency of, oh, we beat a ranked opponent, then you followed up. To beat Oklahoma and not have a letdown on the road against a solid Iowa State team and to win that one, I think really showed where Lance Leipold can take this program, and it was at that point in time. All right, let's get into our top 7 coming up next. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. With the NFL playoffs almost here, it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. You can get futures. Who you think is going to win the Super Bowl? Who's going to make the Final Four? Who's going to win the national championship in college football with the playoff continuing on? All you got to do, visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Continuing on, thank you for making this your first listen every day into our top 7 of the best wins of the Lance Leipold era for Kansas. Number 7, the new era game. That was KU's 55-42 victory at West Virginia in overtime on September 10th of 2022. So Kansas ends up in this game winning in what was an absolute shootout. And it was another game where Kansas probably, like, they should have just won in regulation. They were up 42-31. West Virginia kicks a field goal with 4 minutes to go. You're up 8. Kansas gets the ball. They can't get a first down. And then you end up punting the ball away. And then I think West Virginia had like a tipped ball over the middle that the receiver runs under and then runs for a huge gain. And it was just like, what's going on? They get the touchdown. They get the 2-point conversion. Defense was just exhausted at that point. But you go down, you respond, you get the touchdown from Jalon Daniels to Quentin Skinner in overtime. Then Kobe Bryant has the pick six, seals the deal. You get the video after the game, Jalon Daniels shouting, "New era." And Jalon Daniels was great in this game. 18 of 29, 219, 3 touchdowns, no picks. He also had 12 carries, 85 yards, led the team in rushing. You also got 2 touchdowns from Daniel Highshaw, 2 touchdowns from Devin Neal. It was just a masterclass by the KU offense. And, it wasn't a great game for the defense, giving up 42 points, but they made some key plays when you needed them to, including that Kobe Bryant play. And this was a game, too, you got down big early. You were down 21-7 early in the second quarter. And it would have been easy to kind of fold from there, especially you're coming off a 2-10 season. You're coming off a lot of bad seasons if you're Kansas, and they believed and they got it done. And so you could probably rank this one higher if you are really viewing this as, okay, this was the new era. This is when things started. You could also rank it higher if you viewed it as, hey, again, going back to the idea, every win was the difference in you making a bowl game in that 2022 season. There is a part of me, though, that wonders, like, if you end up going 5-7, hypothetically, in 2022, off the heels of a 2-10 season, off the heels of a bunch of 0, 1, 2, 3 win seasons over the previous decade, I think people still would have been excited on how that 2023 season finished. You would have been like, oh, they were so close to a bowl. But it would have felt like it was building up to the 2023 season in which you did win 9 games and win a bowl game. So, like, knowing with hindsight 2020 that you at least have that the year after, obviously it was great to go to a bowl game in 2022, and you're happy that it happened. But, knowing that you ended up making a bowl game the year after and winning it, right? Maybe that, I don't know, maybe that allows me to rank it lower on the list, I guess is what I'm saying. But it was a great game too. And, West Virginia didn't end up being great that season or anything like that. So that makes it tougher to get it higher on this list with some of the ones that I'm about to go over. Well, let's get into those top 6. Number 6 on the list is Kansas at number 7, BYU. Had a really tough time ranking this one versus that one because, again, you talk about the significance of the big picture. Kansas doesn't make a bowl game this season. And you talk about the big picture, the 2022, they do make a bowl game. So, like, theoretically, if you were to get rid of the BYU win this year, okay, Kansas still isn't making a bowl game. But if you get rid of that West Virginia win, they're not making a bowl game, right? It changes things. But it's hard for me because think about for how long Kansas could not win a road game. Think about for how long Kansas just couldn't win on the road in conference play. And, like, you think about it when, like, remember when it was such a big deal that Kansas went to Central Michigan and, Puka Williams is running all over them and they're getting a huge road win. Central Michigan wasn't good, but like Kansas, just the fact that they're getting a road win was gigantic. And, like, you cannot take for granted the fact that this program went, hundreds of days without winning a road game, went on the road this season against a team at the time who was ranked 7th in the country and won the game. And so, yes, it sucks that they didn't make a bowl game this year, and that is true. But, like, when you're going back in history, I don't know. I almost wonder if it is going to be more historic, right? 20 years from now, what's going to be more talked about when Kansas went on the road and got a top 10 win? Like, will that be brought up in a footnote or a stat more often? Or will it be that, oh, they made a bowl game and finished 6-7 in the 2022 season, right? I don't know. I think it might be the BYU one. Like, winning on the top 10 on the road, that doesn't really happen for Kansas. Plus, at the time, this gave Kansas their second straight ranked victory. And that was the first time in program history. So they've been to other bowl games in program history. This is the first time in program history that they had won back-to-back ranked games, and you did one on the road. It obviously was a very weird game. It wasn't the most entertaining game, 17-13, though. I don't think it was one of those, like, low-scoring games where you walked away from it being like, oh, that was just sloppy, ugly football. I think it was just, there was actually, like, pretty good defense in the game, and it was cold weather and, like, 2 hard-fought physical football teams. And then you have the Jalon Daniels pooch punt, which is kind of the play of the game. And you did enough from there. And Kansas ends up making the stand in their red zone and ends up coming through with the victory. So I have that one in at number 6. Into the top 5, though, would be the very next week, winning against Colorado on senior day. I thought on merit, if you were just saying what's more impressive, winning at number 7 or winning at home against number 16, it would be at number 7 BYU. But it felt like these were escalating wins, right? The Iowa State one escalated to the BYU one, which escalated to the Colorado one. And now you're starting to be like, oh my gosh, they could go bowling. We don't need to talk about what happened after that. But you add to it as well with the Colorado one that the BYU one doesn't have is its senior day. And that has to matter for a class of seniors that was so big. And I will just always remember this as the Devin Neal game. I mean, it was senior game or senior day for him. He goes for 207 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had 287 total yards between rushing and receiving. Colorado as a team had 308 total yards. He was unbelievable. Jalon was good when his number was called, 9 pass yards per attempt. He didn't have to get called too much because Devin Neal was that good. It was just a really impressive effort for KU. Plus, it was cool that you got to see the Heisman Trophy winner on the other side. And, okay, if you made history by beating BYU, first time in program history, back-to-back AP top 25 wins, okay, well, now you made new history. It's the first time with 3 straight, so that gets added on as well. And I just think about, like, when you think about some of the past performances, as I said, with the Devin Neal game, like you think about it like a Tony Sands game against Missouri or something like that. That is how people are going to remember this, with Devin Neal just absolutely going off against Colorado. And the vibes were high after this game. So I do have that one in at number 5. Number 4 on this list, this might be controversial. Maybe this should be higher because you only have one postseason win. I shouldn't say only, like, don't take them for granted. They're tough to do. But maybe this one should be number 1. I'm going to go with the guaranteed rate bowl. That's in at number 4 against UNLV. 49-36 was the final score. High scoring game. Those are fun. So that's a plus there. It's a bowl game win, which, the significance of that, Kansas hadn't done it since winning the Insight Bowl, like basically 15 years earlier, right? So I guess, yeah, Insight Bowl was 2008, and this was played in December 2023. So, yeah, 15 years between your last bowl win. So, like, the significance of that is gigantic. I kind of wonder, though, like, so UNLV this year obviously ended up being really good. I think they were better than they were a season ago. UNLV was still good last year. They went 9-5. They were also played for the Mountain West title game. But does that cheapen it at all to the idea that, you didn't beat like another Power 5 team or something like that? Does it make it less memorable? Not cheapen it. Does it just make it less memorable, right? Than if you would have won like the Arkansas game, for instance, in the Liberty Bowl. Like, that would have been more memorable. Obviously, the game was absolutely bananas, absolutely nuts. This was a super fun. Jason Bean, 6 touchdowns, 449 yards. They did a pretty good job against Devin Neal, but you got 132 from LJ Arnold. You got 160 from Luke Grimm. Both of them had 3 touchdowns. It was just a masterclass by the KU offense. Obviously, the game didn't end up being as entertaining as maybe the score indicated. If you would remember the penalty yardage that occurred, it was unbelievable. Kansas was penalized 18 times for 216 yards. UNLV was penalized 9 times for 99 yards, which normally would be a high number, but like that paled in comparison to KU. So like that didn't make the game as entertaining probably. And obviously it's a very big win, but going back to the idea, like, I guess if you would have lost that game, it would have felt disappointing because you were big. I think they were like double-digit favorites coming into that game. But like if you lose the West Virginia, maybe I'm talking myself into this one should be even lower on this. If you lose the West Virginia game in 2022, or if you lose, maybe one of the games that we're going to talk about soon, or if you lose that Iowa State game we talked about in 2022, you're not making a bowl game. Which, like, making the bowl game feels like the bigger reward than winning the bowl game, if that makes sense. Like, you want to cap your season off strong. It's awesome to make the bowl game, but like the reward of making the bowl game is the significance of you having a winning season, or at least a 500 season. It's getting the extra bowl practices. So anyway, that one is number 4 on the list. Let's get to the top 3 after this timeout. And this episode is brought to you by Game Time, focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better. And it honestly is the perfect gift. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. And if you're gifting somebody tickets, that might really help you out because you might be like, I don't know which tickets to pick. Boom. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less too, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time. What time is it? Game time. Finishing things up, top 3 best wins of the Lance Leipold era. This would be another one that I think some people, if you're just viewing the significance, maybe it should be number 1 because maybe it is the start of everything. Like maybe everything that we've had happen, making 2 straight bowl games, winning a bunch of ranked games, winning a bowl game doesn't happen without this game. I have it at number 3 though, and that would be Kansas at Texas in Austin, November 13th of 2021. Kansas wins 57-56 in overtime. It had everything you wanted from just an individual game, right? It's high scoring. You have a crazy comeback, which is kind of what happened with Texas. Also, though, from the Kansas perspective, you might view that as well. That should have just never happened. And then you get overtime, and then you get the heroics of a walk-on, little-known name of Jared Casey at the time. Obviously, Jared Casey blew up after this and ended up being an all-Big 12 first-team fullback this season and stuff. But at the time, you're talking about a walk-on Jared Casey. The story blew up for him to catch the 2-point conversion. And this was KU's first, we go back to, road wins. They win their first game in Austin since like World War II. They win their first road Big 12 game in who knows how long. They get their first Big 12 win of the season. This was the game that really set the foundation for what Kansas could do under Lance Leipold. And you saw it from Jalon Daniels as well, who this was, I believe, his first start for that 2021 team. He goes 21 of 30 for 202, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 11 carries, 45, and a touchdown. So it's not just the importance of setting the foundation for Lance Leipold, getting all the players, all the fans to believe the proof of concept. It's also that you found your guy. To that point, Jason Bean was the starter. Then he gets injured against Kansas State. Jalon Daniels finishes the game, gets the start here, plays well. Then he furthers it and plays well in the final 2 games at TCU and West Virginia. And so without those, Jalon might not be the starter for the start of the 2022 season. And, I think the 2023 version of Jason Bean was as good as any of the quarterbacks Lance Leipold has had. And I think there were certainly flashes from Jason Bean in the 2022 season as well. But do you make a bowl game if you don't have that hot start for Jalon Daniels to start the 2022 season? No, probably not. Like, there's just a lot of things that would be different. Devin Neal was also great in this game too, by the way. 24 carries, 143 yards. Kwame Lassiter had 8 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown. Kenny Logan had 11 tackles. You got a pick 6 from Kobe Bryant, which I guess is kind of the start of like his legend too at Kansas. OJ Burrows had an interception. This game was fun. It was awesome. It was cool to finally win at Texas. Like, in a lot of ways, you could make the argument this should be number 1 for the significance. But at the end of the day, what kept pulling me back is like, okay, you went 2-10 that season. And as much as that might have laid the foundation, what about the West Virginia game where you shouted out new era? Did that lay the foundation? What about the following 2 weeks where you played really well and it felt like you were boosting positive into the next week? So very deserving to be number 1, but I had it at number 3. Number 2 on the list is 37-16 against number 18 Oklahoma State in 2022. So the big significance of this one is it got you bowl eligible, got you to 6-3 on the season, got you to bowl eligibility for the first time since that 2008 season in which you made it to the Insight Bowl, right? For back-to-back bowl games with that and the Orange Bowl. So that's the big significance. But you also beat the number 18 team in the country, and you pounded them 37-16. Obviously, you got Garrett Rankell, which was good for KU. Jason Bean this was one of Jason Bean's best games of his Kansas career. 18 of 23, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, super efficient, almost 9 yards per attempt. And he had 4 carries for 93 yards and a touchdown. He broke that long one, which to me was kind of the play of the game. Obviously, the Colorado game was the Devin Neal game, as we kind of talked about earlier. This was Devin Neal's best game of his collegiate career. 32 carries, 224 yards, 7 yards a carry, and a touchdown. 6 catches for 110 yards. That is 38 plays from scrimmage for 334 yards and a touchdown. So like Devin Neal has 2 games that you could really point to here. But yeah, you beat a ranked opponent, you do it at home, you get to bowl eligibility for the first time in forever. I think it kind of explains why it's number 2 on the list. Number 1 on the list, though, is what was marked as, I will always remember the call, Jason Benetti, who was doing the play-by-play, a generational win for Kansas, and that is their victory over Oklahoma, 38-33. Oklahoma came into the game ranked 6th in the country. Big noon for Fox was there as well. And there ends up being like the delay. I think it was like a lightning delay. You end up winning the game. It's unbelievable. It's back and forth. Like some of these other games is like, oh, this team came back, or, you shouldn't have let them back into the game. This was just back and forth kind of the whole way through. It was just an excellent game, like objectively. If you were just a neutral fan, you were probably like, oh, what a back and forth game. Then you get Devin Neal, who punches it in with a 9-yard run. Kansas makes the stop. They got a little further down the field than you would have wanted them to. Jason Bean ends up only 47% completion rate with no touchdowns and 2 picks, but on the game's most important play on the 4th down, delivers to LJ Arnold, who had 3 catches for 79 yards. Devin Neal goes for 112 and a touchdown. High shot adds 51 yards. The defense comes up with some big plays like the J.B. Brown forced fumble, the Mello Dotson pick 6 toward the beginning of the game. It was a fun game. It was the last time you were playing Oklahoma before they left the SEC, and you hadn't beat them since the 90s. So to go out that way against them, it also got you ranked after this. It also got you a lot of notoriety. You were ranked in the college football playoff rankings. You end up winning 9 games that season. That is the creme de la creme of wins for me and Lance Leipold's time here at Kansas. But a lot of tough ones to choose from, and some that I ended up leaving off the list that probably could have deserved to be on there too. All right, that'll do it for this episode of the show. And you can hit me up at D Johnson Radio or at Derek Johnson on Blue Sky and let me know if you thought one should have been on there that wasn't, or maybe one was too high, too low. And, maybe everybody has their own personal favorites. That's the beauty of this. So stick with us tomorrow. We're going to do KU basketball best wins of the 2024 calendar year. We'll see you then with LOJ.